Welcome, everyone. We're diving into some really transformative ideas in education today, especially around the concept of street data and how it can reframe our approach to teaching and learning.
I'm really excited about this discussion. It's such a shift from the old way we've been doing things, right?
Absolutely. It's like instead of solely relying on the traditional metrics like test scores and attendance, there's this call for a much more human-centered approach, really focusing on listening and understanding our students.
Yep, right. So we're not just looking at the numbers to define success, but really getting into the story behind every student's journey.
Exactly. The idea is that these challenges we see, from learning losses to teacher shortages, aren't just symptoms of a failing system, but possibly the early stages of a necessary rebirth.
It's like seeing the cracks in a building and thinking, maybe this is the moment to build something entirely new.
Yeah, it's like those cracks might actually be the birth pangs of a reimagined educational future, one that's more resilient, responsive, and deeply humane.
Exactly. So, I guess one crucial element here is redefining what we mean by data in education, right? We're talking less about numbers and more about stories, experiences, and context.
Spot on. Instead of just tallying up mistakes or standardized test scores, the street data approach urges us to be more intentional. It says, hey, listen to your students' personal context, understand their hardships, celebrate their successes, really see them as individuals.
Yeah, and that's a totally fresh perspective. I mean, when you think about it, our education system has been so entrenched in the idea of measurement that if you shift the lens even slightly, you're challenging decades of practice.
Absolutely. It's a rather radical reimagining. It invites educators to unlearn how they've always thought about data. And it's almost spiritual in a sense, calling for a love-centered approach to education.
Very true. But isn't there a risk here? I mean, I'm thinking, can this approach really go far enough to address systemic problems like budget shortfalls or teacher shortages? Or is it more of an idealistic way of looking at things?
That's a fair point, and it's important we critically consider that. While the focus is on qualitative insights and deep personal narratives, it doesn't negate the importance of quantitative measures entirely. It means using both systems in tandem.
Right, I see that balance. So it's not completely abandoning numbers, but rather putting them in the background while foregrounding human experiences.
Exactly. Think of it like a new lens that adjusts the focus. Numbers still matter, but they're not the whole story. We're encouraged to appreciate the spark in every student's unique context.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And it's fascinating because this approach pulls in voices from both academic research and real-life experiences. You've got people like Zan Mehta from Harvard stirring the pot with these ideas.
Yes, and then you also have voices like Lisa Chapman from the National Equity Project, who remind us of the urgency to listen and respond, almost like it's a rallying cry to rehumanize the classroom.
Absolutely. Then there's Sean Ginwright and even Lisa K. Solomon, who provide that personal, lived experience dimension. It really blends academic rigor with personal narratives.
Right. And that blend is what makes the street data concept so compelling. It's like the old data is the blueprint, but street data is the vibrant, living mural that tells the entire story.
Interesting analogy, mural versus blueprint. I love that visualization. But don't you think there's a challenge in shifting away from a system that's been reliant on clear-cut numbers for so long? I'm a bit skeptical about whether institutions can really pivot to such a qualitative approach.
That's a valid critique. Transitioning from a system built on quantifiable metrics to one that values narrative and context is no small feat. It involves a cultural, structural, and even spiritual shift. However, in many cases, educators are already experimenting with this blend to cover all bases.
True. So, essentially, it's not an either-or situation, but more a rebalancing incorporating both measurable outcomes and qualitative understandings.
Precisely, it's about recalibrating the scales. Instead of letting numbers dictate policy and perception entirely, we're invited to consider the emotions, circumstances, and the rich lived experiences of every student.
Yeah, and this rebalancing, it's almost revolutionary. We have to think of all these traditional benchmarks as just one piece of the larger educational puzzle.
Exactly. It's like if you only looked at one corner of a canvas, you'd miss the full picture. Street data demands that we see the whole canvas. Every brushstroke matters.
Definitely. And yet, with this approach, there must be strategies for how to systematically collect and analyze these qualitative insights. I mean, do we have any practical ideas on how that's going to work?
Yeah, it's challenging for sure. The literature suggests integrating these rich personal narratives into daily school practices. It might mean more one-on-one conversations, having educators document observations, and really making space for what students share.
Right. So it might be more like qualitative diaries or journals of sorts, rather than spreadsheets. Exactly. And then those stories can inform more nuanced interventions than a mere standardized test ever could.
Yes, exactly. It shifts the conversation from what's our school's failure rate to how can we truly support these students in their unique journeys. It's a more empathetic, personalized approach.
That's really refreshing. But here's a thought. How do we balance this idealistic approach with the reality that policymakers still need hard data to justify budgets and such?
That's the big elephant in the room. Policymakers do need numbers, but the argument here is to expand our data boundaries. The goal is to incorporate qualitative, narrative data alongside quantitative metrics, so that the funding and policies reflect the complex reality of learning.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right. It's not about discarding numbers, but ensuring that they don't choke out the very essence of what education is meant to be, supporting every individual holistically.
Exactly right. By embracing a fuller picture, we're actually moving towards more equitable and responsive education systems. Imagine a classroom where every student's voice shapes the learning process, not just the bell curve.
That's an inspiring vision. And if you think about it, merging these approaches could lead to more resilient institutions that adapt to the needs of students in real time.
Right, it's like nurturing a garden rather than just counting its flowers. It's about understanding the soil, the climate, and the intricate interrelations that nurture growth.
That's a neat metaphor. So, if we break it down, street data is calling on us to be attentive, compassionate, and more innovative about how we assess student potential. In other words, promoting equity in educational success.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that education isn't just about numbers on a paper. It's about the human spirit, the messy yet beautiful process of growth.
Yeah, that's really profound. But I wonder, can educators realistically integrate this approach without being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of qualitative information? It seems like a lot to manage in a system already stretched thin.
That's a legitimate concern. It may require additional training, support, and perhaps new tech solutions that make it easier to capture and analyze these narratives. It's an evolution that ideally builds on our existing structures while gently reshaping them.
Right? It's about evolution rather than revolution, even though the ideas are revolutionary in spirit. Absolutely. And it's so exciting to think that by embracing this more humane model, we're not just fighting a failing system. We're potentially uncovering the keys to a much more equitable and thriving future for education.
Exactly, and that's the message. A call to rethink and reweave our approaches to truly nurture every learner's potential.
Yeah, exactly.